NewsView, a look at some of the news of note with Michael Badger from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois.
Hello and welcome to another edition of NewsView, Urbana-Champaign's smallest newscast and interview show. Tonight a special guest, Mr. Doug Quick from WICD-TV, and he's been around here in Central Illinois media for a long time now, and we're glad to have him here on NewsView.
It's good to be here, Michael. Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. Here's my first question for him, and that is, what was your first job?
Okay, well, other than working in high school at a local Walgreens agency drugstore, I started a career path that was going to take me to perhaps pharmacy school to become a pharmacist. And I had a change of heart somewhere along the line. I worked at a local Walgreens and was a pharmacy apprentice, and which I guess they call them pharmacy techs now, and had kind of a change of heart. I've always had an interest in broadcasting. It goes back to my childhood, I guess. I had grandparents that didn't like to throw things away, and they watched me a lot when I was very, very young, and they had a box of old TV guides. Even before I learned to read, I was thumbing through these TV guides, going back into the very early days of that publication, back in the early 50s. And kind of got the TV interest bug going and in broadcasting. And later when I learned to read, I would read these things from front to back to front, top to bottom. And they'd go back 1953 all the way through the late 1950s at that time. And so kind of always had the broadcast bug going. And my parents were very young. My dad listened to a lot of Top 40 radio when I was very young and listened to stations like KXOK in St. Louis. And I grew up originally in Taylorville. And with that, it always intrigued me. Broadcasting was always a part of it. And it was a big challenge for me at that time because I was a stutterer. When I went through grade school and junior high and even the earlier part of my high school, stuttering was always a major problem of mine. And it wasn't until I got into high school that I actually started to work a little more at it to solve the issue. I still stutter occasionally, but most people probably don't notice it. After the side trip, I guess, in working at the drugstore when I was a kid and through the first couple of years of college, I went to the local radio station in Taylorville and I said, hey, I'd love to do a rock and roll show at night. I had no experience in doing this at all. And I'd put together a tape, much like what a lot of kids would do in their, their bedrooms. And you hand it to them and lo and behold, they ended up hiring me. Well, I think in all reality, they probably just needed a nighttime operator, but they allowed me to do that. And so I started doing that and kind of got things rolling, and it was interesting to me, and I ended up going from that nighttime shift to early morning shift on the AM station. And they played country music, and I wasn't really a big country music fan at that time. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to go back to school. So I went back to college after taking a year off and ended up majoring in broadcast, communications, radio and television with a minor in chemistry. So I had at least a couple of years of chemistry and the pre-pharmacy program behind me at Lincoln Land Community College, and then I went to Western Illinois. But from the radio beginnings, I was doing some things when I was in college with, of course, the local campus station and doing some television work there in what was called Unicom at Western Illinois, and did some news anchoring and was still doing radio on weekends at both Springfield at WTAX and WDBR, and at my local station in Taylorville was doing some weekend shifting there. And because of the fact that we were allowed to voice track in Springfield, I was actually on two radio stations 30 miles apart at the same time, which was kind of unique. But it worked, and I did that for a long time, and ended up coming to Danville when ownership there had purchased WDAN, WDNL from a station group. The group that I worked with in Springfield had purchased the station in Danville, and I transferred over to Danville. There I met my wife, and you know, the rest is pretty much history. But I was at the Danville station and associated with them for a good part of over 25 years. I was still doing a lot of voice work for them up until 2002, and of course I was at Channel 15. I started there in 1994.
So it's been a lot of different experiences.
Yeah, a lot of different broadcast experiences. I also spent a little bit of time. I had a what I call a 3 or 4 month sabbatical in Decatur. I worked at a group of stations there back in 1979. Didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to work out, so I ended up coming back to Danville. But over my career, I've worked in Springfield, Taylorville, Decatur, Champaign, Urbana, and Danville. So I've worked in basically all of the major metro areas in this market.
Central Illinois,
Yeah.
yes. An interesting thing, you mentioned TV guides
Yeah.
your grandparents had. When I was in school, I used to make my own, I'd copy the newspaper's TV guide.
Sure, sure.
And then I'd post it up on the wall at
Sure.
school. The teacher'd take it down
Right.
quickly.
Well, that was sort of an early attempt of blogging, I guess,
Yeah.
in the internet at that time. Yeah, you know, I was very much I never really visited a TV studio when I was a kid, but I had a pretty good idea of what it looked like, and it's amazing that in looking back, it's pretty much how I envisioned it. I mean, there was really no real surprises. I enjoy working with TV, and it's very different than what it was on radio.
Right.
Many jobs and many things that I did on radio were basically one-person operations. I had a lot of experience in broadcast sales. You'd go out and you sell advertising, you come back, you write the commercial, you go in the studio, you produce it, and in many occasions, you would actually put it on the air, you'd enter it into the station's log, and it could be on the air within 30 minutes. Unfortunately, with television, it doesn't happen that way. It takes a lot of different people, it takes a lot of teamwork, and that takes some getting used to. And I think the first few years in my TV career, that was probably the biggest challenge that I had to do, because I had to think several days in advance in order to achieve anything. And at that particular time, when I started at 15, I was there as a promotions director.
Okay, well, I was also wondering what your favorite job was in broadcast.
Boy, you know, it's been I can't really say anything's a favorite. I enjoy being on the air.
Okay.
I think anyone that's on the air definitely has an ego. If they say they don't, they're lying to you. But I enjoy being on the air. I enjoy being a communicator. I enjoy the response. I enjoy positive and negative reaction from the public. Fortunately, I don't get that much negative, you know, for one reason or another. But I enjoy the feedback. I enjoy hearing from people, and I enjoy, you know, people. I remember growing up and remembering the personalities of the day. The Mr. Roberts at Channel 3,
Right.
the Lorne Boatman at 17 in Decatur, and growing up with all of these people and how much they influenced me, whether they know it or not, or listening to the radio and listening to the Johnny Rabbits in St. Louis, or listening to the Larry Lujaks at WLS, and how much of an impression, and it's such a privilege to have people tell me, give me feedback, much like what I remembered of these former personalities. And it's kind of neat to know, to have somebody come up and go, gee, I grew up with you, listening to you on the radio, and I grew up watching you on TV, and it's very, very gratifying.
Well, my next question is, how did you get where you are now at WICD?
Well, it was kind of a strange situation, but it was a great opportunity. I wanted to do it. when I was hired at 15, Les Van, who was general manager at that time, had said, well, you know, I want to be able to hire you. I've got 2 positions open. One of them is a promotions director. The other one was being involved in sales. And I said, you know, I've done sales for a number of years, for over 25 years. I think I'd like to do the promotions job and being a promotions director. And he says, okay, fine. You're now promotions director. And I said, okay, one question though, what does a promotions director do? I didn't have a clue at that particular point in time. Fortunately, I wasn't walking in somebody else's footsteps. The station had been without a promotions director for a number of years. So I got to set it up the way I envisioned it. And I based a lot of that information on what I did on radio. Okay. And being involved in the community and making personal appearances and doing all of the things that disc jockeys would do at the radio station,
Right.
but I applied that to television. And being a promotions director today is a much different scenario. But I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the ability to do that, and then I got into doing some weekend weathercasting, and of course grew from there.
Well, this is Newsview with an interview with Mr. Doug Quick, who currently works at WICD TV Channel 15 in Champaign. I think we'll take one break now, and we'll be right back after this. Hello and welcome back to Newsview. For those of you just tuning in, I have a special guest this edition, Mr. Doug Quick of WICD Television in Champaign, and he's here to answer a few questions, and it's just another Newsview on Friday night. Well, my next question is, do you have any advice for those who want to get into broadcasting?
Boy, you know, I think it's a much tougher process now than it was even when I got into it. I was fortunate enough to live in a relatively small hometown situation, and that also had an AM/FM radio station that I could walk into basically off the street and say, hey, I want to do this. And the timing was right, and he ends up hiring me. The general manager at that particular time was also dean of boys when I was in high school. So, I mean, it's that small a town that you're dealing with a lot of the same people. I didn't spend a lot of time in his office when I was in high school, so I guess that was good. But he ended up hiring me. And nowadays, local radio stations do not have that availability. They're either satellite delivered or basically it's a PC-driven radio station that doesn't require a great deal of labor, and it's very difficult for people to get into it, especially from the performing end of it, because there aren't a lot of local disc jockeys anymore. And even in some of the major markets, some of the disc jockeys, I feel, are sadly lacking in experience and talent. And the reason why is because there's no farm club now. You don't move up from a smaller market to a medium market to a larger market and develop skills and abilities along the way. Now, there aren't that many options available for small market radio for people to get into, and it's unfortunate. I think the radio station consolidation situation makes it even doubly difficult, because one person might be on one station as one person, they're on another station as another person, where they utilize people to the max.
Right.
If you're fortunate enough to be one of those people, that's great, but it's very difficult to crack that. I think an opportunity like something that you're doing here is definitely a terrific option, and that gives a person like you enough experience to actually go on at some point and develop skills and abilities and talents where you can go further. So webcasting, doing radio station webcasting is probably about the only way to be noticed. And even then, there's so many of them out there. How do you get noticed? It's very, very difficult. If you know somebody that works at the radio station and you can get friends with them and you can hang around them, you might be able to use their abilities as something to build on and spend time at the station and learn all of the technology involved. The technology in this business has just exploded. Everything that I took in college from a technical standpoint is obsolete. Everything outside of the performance end of it. Back when I was in college and doing television, we had black and white cameras. We didn't have teleprompters. Virtually no pre-recording. We had just gotten our first mini cam that was in a suitcase 3 times the size of this table. And now, when you can take video off your cell phone, I mean, it's an incredible technological explosion which is taking place, and it's difficult to stay on top of everything, and that makes it even harder to break into the business.
Well, we will be seen on cable channel 6 in this area and 99 on AT&T UVerse and on YouTube. So that technology has changed even since I
Well,
started.
certainly, and these are outlets that didn't exist just a few short years ago.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And my next question is, how is life outside of your job?
Life outside of the job is very good. I live in northern Vermilion County. I commute 50 miles a day to the TV station and 50 miles home. Price of gasoline is very important to me. But I enjoy where I live. I enjoy living in Vermilion County. I love Central Illinois. It's been my home. I was born and raised in Central Illinois. I was educated in Central Illinois. And I hate winter, but I love everything else associated. There are terrific people here in Central Illinois, all different walks of life. And I have a grandson. My first grandson was born in August, and so I would say things are well. I have 2 daughters.
Well, that's good. And I know you are very active in trying to remind people to turn their headlights on in their car.
Absolutely. Being that I do commute for such a long time, my wife kind of gets aggravated at me sometimes, but I do remind people, to turn their headlights on. It's important. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It doesn't increase the size of your electric bill or your cost of your electric bill. It's just a matter of common courtesy, and it's actually to everyone's benefit. But people need to pay more attention to their driving situation. And we all make driving mistakes, no doubt about it. Some of them end in accidents, most of them don't, fortunately. But this is something that can be controlled. The safest drivers on the road are sometimes the ones that go through the stop sign, that don't drive with their headlights on. So it's just an important aspect. And me being on the road 2 hours a day, it's
you
very.
See a lot, I'm sure.
It's just one of those things that kind of eat at you.
Right.
So that's why I remind people about it.
Well, I think that wraps up our interview with Mr. Doug Quick, who works at WICD-TV in Champaign-Urbana. And stay tuned for the weather right here on NewsView. And here's your NewsView weather forecast for the weekend. Friday night, a low temperature should get down to 31 degrees Fahrenheit with partly cloudy skies. And for Saturday, a high temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit with a possibility of precipitation or rain at 40%. And that goes for Saturday night, too. It's a low of 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And Sunday, the high temperature should reach 50 degrees Fahrenheit and with cloudy skies. And then Sunday night, cloudy with a 50% chance of rain or snow. A low of 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Thanks for watching NewsView and the weather on NewsView. Don't forget to tune in next time. And I'm Michael Badger. Good night.